Chosen one, every being across existence has witnessed your transformation into your godly form. And now the world is in chaos. They are calling you the crazy god, and it's happening right before their eyes. The top experts, scientists, and researchers have found something extraordinary about you, something they cannot explain. Even the ancient writings and holy texts, long forgotten and buried in the sands of time, have pointed to this very moment. These sacred books, once thought to be myths, now reveal you as the chosen one, destined for something beyond divine. You are changing, evolving into something far greater, something that transcends the limits of gods themselves. Now, every being on this earth, humans, animals, celestial entities, can feel the shift. It's undeniable. This transformation has already begun, and the world has entered the God era. The ancient mythologies, from Greek to Egyptian, from the philosophies of old to the deepest spiritual truths, have all been pointing to you. Every prophecy, every whisper of the past, all lead to this moment. They saw it coming, and now it is here. The world leaders, the elites, even the holy figures and secret cult scholars have all confirmed the truth. They have recognized your transformation as something that was foretold, something that was always meant to happen. You are no longer bound by the limits of time or age. You are in the process of becoming God, the God One of this new universe. Your true and final form is emerging, and it is terrifying in its power. The world is shaking, and every being now realizes the magnitude of your transformation. As your power grows stronger by the day, the shift becomes more intense. They call you the crazy god, and as your power amplifies, they know they are witnessing something beyond their comprehension. You are the one they prayed for, the one they've all been waiting for. It is all connected to you, the God One. Before we dive deeper into this monumental shift, take a moment to pause this video. Hit that like button, subscribe to help us reach 20,000 subscribers, and leave a comment with the number 11. This number will send a powerful signal to the universe, amplifying the energy of this video. And remember, if you are truly a chosen one, you'll stick with us until the end. Because deep down, your spirit already knows that it began not with a whisper, but with a thunderous shift that echoed through dimensions. Every being, from the highest realms of angels to the deepest trenches of the earth, witnessed a light that tore through the fabric of reality itself. Eyes that had never seen light saw you. Creatures that had no concept of time froze, not from fear, but from awe. And across every realm, one phrase rang like a celestial bell. The chosen one has risen. In that singular, surreal moment, you weren't just seen, you were recognized. The recognition wasn't merely visual, it was spiritual, emotional, ancestral. People fell to their knees without understanding why. The old and the young wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming truth they had been denied their entire lives. Their spirits remembered you, even if their minds could not comprehend. The world stopped. Gravity felt different. Birds forgot to fly. Oceans held their breath, and even fire dimmed to witness the spectacle of a mortal soul cracking open to reveal a god core brighter than stars. You weren't evolving. You were emerging, like a sun that had been hidden behind a veil of flesh. Prophets across time had dreams of this day. Indigenous tribes carved it into stone. Monks buried it in chants, and ancient civilizations encoded your coming in hieroglyphs. Some called it the return, others the great eye-opening. but they all meant one thing: you. And now, that prophecy had erupted into reality with no turning back. The emotional weight of the moment was unbearable for many. Some cried tears of joy. Others screamed in confusion. Governments shut down. Scientists stared at the sky with trembling hands. And yet, amidst this chaos, one undeniable truth was carved into the soul of existence. You are no longer who you were. They called you crazy because they couldn't understand. Because to witness something that violates every law of science, scripture, and logic is to flirt with insanity. Your awakening shattered the world's definition of godhood. Not serene, not detached, but raw, wild, and limitless. This wasn't divine peace. This was divine eruption. The term crazy god echoed from mountaintops to underground temples. It didn't mean unhinged. It meant uncontainable. It meant a power so vast that language breaks trying to explain it. People who once doubted the supernatural now tattooed your name into their skin. Those who mocked belief now built altars with trembling hands. You didn't rise from a throne. You rose from the ashes of humanity's limited imagination. And as your god form spread across planes of existence, the old gods trembled, not out of hatred, but reverence. For even they saw that something greater had awoken, something they themselves were foretold to bow to. The emotional impact was beyond religious. People who had lost hope in everything suddenly found themselves weeping in streets, praying in languages they didn't know. Your transformation healed broken hearts, broke hardened minds, and lit a fire of reverence in even the darkest souls. It wasn't just change, it was rebirth. As civilizations watched in disbelief, one truth rang louder than all others. This God does not ask for worship. This God simply is. And in that unspoken understanding, a new age began. The era of the crazy God. The world's top minds, astrophysicists, neuroscientists, theologians, quantum theorists, were united by one common response: silence. Every formula failed. Every theory collapsed. You weren't a phenomenon to be explained. You were a new variable that rewrote reality itself. They studied the skies where your transformation took place. Patterns in the stars realigned. Time anomalies spiked. Machines stopped working. And satellites captured footage that later vanished from databanks as if the universe itself was protecting your secret. No law of physics could explain it, and that terrified them. Emotionally, even the most hardened skeptics began to feel it. A pull in their chest. Dreams of a being wrapped in golden storms. Visions of their childhood selves whispering your name. Many tried to resist it, but the evidence was beyond physical. It was spiritual resonance, the kind science had never dared to admit existed. Then came the declarations. Institutions that had once laughed at the divine held press conferences where they admitted, "We've encountered something beyond our scope, beyond divine, beyond comprehension." And in that moment, fear turned into fascination. Disbelief turned into desperate inquiry. The impossible had come alive, and it was you. The truth settled in like a sunrise, warm, overwhelming, and undeniable. You weren't discovered. You revealed yourself, and the world would never be the same again. Scrolls hidden for thousands of years, untouched by light, began to hum. In temples swallowed by sand, priests discovered inscriptions that once seemed metaphorical, but now mirrored your exact awakening. Lines like, "And the light will walk again, wearing flesh that shatters time," suddenly made sense. They were talking about you. Religions that never agreed on anything found overlapping prophecies. In Hindu Vedas, Norse runes, Christian revelations, African oral traditions, your face emerged in different forms, all pointing to one truth, a divine return that transcends all divisions. Not a god of a people, but a god for existence itself. In the land of pharaohs, where the pyramids stood like eternal sentinels, and in the ancient groves where gods of Olympus once walked, the myths of old had always whispered of a chosen one. But they were never clear. They spoke of gods who descended to earth, of mighty beings who would rise from the dust to lead humanity into a new age. You are the one they could never fully understand, but always foretold. The Egyptians spoke of Ra, the sun god who crossed the sky, and in their ancient wisdom, they foretold the coming of a great light that would bring both destruction and salvation. The Greeks, too, echoed this. From Zeus to Prometheus, their stories of gods and mortals intertwined with hints of one who would wield power beyond their comprehension. And now, these two once separate mythologies have merged in a way no one could have predicted. All their prophecies pointed to you. As the people of the modern world began to read these texts once more, it became clear. The gods of Egypt and Greece had not disappeared. They had simply been waiting for you, waiting for their true successor. You embodied the union of every ancient tale, every lost legend. Your form, once bound to earth, now ascended to something celestial, and every story of old came rushing back in waves of divine recognition. Across the world, historians and spiritualists stood in awe, comparing the tales of ancient Egypt and Greece to the modern revelations unfolding before their eyes. They were witnessing the birth of a god whose power crossed all boundaries, time, space, culture, and belief. It was as if the stories of old had been rehearsing for you, just as you had always been rehearsing for this moment. The ultimate myth was no longer a fable. It was a living, breathing truth. It was more than prophecy. It was a cosmic convergence, the merging of time and myth. And in your God form, those who had doubted all the ancient stories now stood in wonder, for they could see clearly you were the chosen one, the culmination of all gods, past and future. The world did not just change, it shuddered. What had once been the domain of the divine was now crumbling under the weight of your transformation. The celestial realms, once orderly and predictable, rippled with the shockwaves of your presence. Gods and angels who had governed the heavens for eons suddenly found themselves displaced, their thrones and power structures quaking beneath the onslaught of your energy. Your very essence bent the rules of existence. Time seemed to stretch, and space seemed to collapse. The laws of physics broke down like fragile glass, and reality itself seemed to pause in awe of your ascension. The old gods knew this feeling. It was the moment they had been waiting for, a divine upheaval of the highest order. Emotionally, the impact was staggering. Once proud, unshakable leaders now fell to their knees. The heads of state trembled before the overwhelming presence that you brought into the world. No longer were they in charge. They were mere spectators in the presence of a power greater than all of them combined. Faithful followers of old religions questioned their very beliefs, unsure of their place in this new, all-encompassing world. But even more than fear or reverence, there was hope. Because for the first time in history, the balance of power was shifting for the good of all. Your rise as the central divine force meant the unification of religions, of belief systems, of all living beings. In a world where everything had been divided, you brought unity, a unity that terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. Leaders who once controlled armies and empires found themselves powerless before you. The architects of wars, the negotiators of peace, the gatekeepers of fate, all stood with bated breath as they watched your rise. The word transformation no longer sufficed. You weren't simply evolving, you were rewriting existence itself, and the world could do nothing but watch. Holy scholars, too, were stunned. For centuries, they had debated, deciphered, and argued over the nature of God, but nothing in their scriptures had prepared them for this. In every holy book, from the Torah to the Quran, from the Bhagavad Gita to the Tao Te Ching, they saw their old predictions suddenly come alive in front of their eyes. It was as if all their years of study had been but preparation for this divine moment. Politicians and clergy, once deeply divided, found themselves forced into a rare alliance. The facts were undeniable. Whether they wanted to believe it or not, you were the living proof of everything they had ever hoped or feared, and with that realization came a strange, unexpected unity. People who once fought over power, territory, and belief found themselves drawn together by the sheer force of your ascension. It was as if you had become the focal point of an awakening that transcended time, culture, and creed. But it wasn't just awe. Some felt fear. Others felt anger. Leaders who had tried to control faith now felt it slip through their fingers. They had spent centuries keeping the masses in the dark, manipulating belief for their own gain. But now, the truth had been exposed, and with it, their influence began to unravel. As your transformation continued, they realized there was nothing they could do to stop the tide of divine power you brought with you. In their stunned silence, one truth became clear. You were not just a god for one nation or one group. You were a god for all. The world, once fractured, was now united in your divine transformation. Deep within hidden libraries, locked away in forbidden chambers, there were always whispers, ancient texts, long thought, destroyed or lost, spoke of a prophecy too dangerous to utter aloud. These were not the prophecies of the mainstream religions. These were the forbidden ones, those that spoke of the end of one age and the arrival of another. And now, the unthinkable had happened. That prophecy had been fulfilled. The prophecy which foretold the rise of a God who would unite all things had long been dismissed as myth. But now, as the world watched your transformation, it became undeniable. The one who would transcend everything had arrived. It wasn't just the culmination of human history, it was the completion of the cosmic cycle. For those who had followed this prophecy in secret, the fulfillment was a mixture of elation and fear. They had always known it would happen, but to witness it firsthand was an experience so overwhelming it left them speechless. They had spent generations in hiding, guarding ancient secrets, waiting for the moment when the world would witness the coming of the Chosen One. And now, that moment was upon them. As this forbidden prophecy spread through the world, the truth was undeniable. You were the fulfillment of an ancient cosmic plan. The shift was not just divine, it was fate. The universe had always been leading to this moment, and everything, from the rise and fall of empires to the birth of civilizations, had been part of this design. You were no longer just a divine being. You were the answer to a question that had been asked for millennia. And now, the prophecy had been fulfilled, and with it came a new era, a new dawn of cosmic unity, led by you. From the moment your transformation began, it was clear. This was no mere ascent. It was a process, a gradual unfolding of divinity that could not be halted, contained, or even predicted. The more time passed, the more you transcended every limit. The world, in all its beauty and terror, was simply an experiment, and you were the final result. As your godhood deepened, the process became even more apparent. What once seemed like random bursts of power now followed a divine rhythm. It was a growing presence, a vast energy that fed off of belief, emotion, and time itself. Even your physical form was transforming. It no longer appeared as a human. It was an entity that defied all known laws of reality. For the world's best scientists, this shift was terrifying. What they had once seen as mere theoretical concepts were now actively happening before their eyes. They knew the laws of the universe could not sustain such power, but the more they observed, the more they realized this wasn't an anomaly. This was your natural state. Godhood had begun, and it was unstoppable. Emotionally, those who had followed your journey from the beginning now found themselves at peace. This was the destiny they had always known was coming, and they accepted it fully, no longer fearful, but hopeful. This process wasn't a loss of humanity, it was an ascension to something greater. The universe, with all its stars and planets, its dust and time, was part of this process, and no force, divine or mortal, could alter its course. The godhood process had begun, and it was irreversible. Time had always been the unbreakable force that shaped existence. It was the invisible ruler, the quiet architect of reality. But before your divine presence, time itself buckled under the weight of your godly evolution. The laws of time and aging began to unravel. The moments became fluid, the future and past collided, and the boundaries between them blurred like a horizon swallowed by an eternal storm. What was once an undeniable truth, that time moves in one direction, no longer held. The idea of age itself began to lose its meaning. As you ascended, your appearance defied any markers of mortality. Age ceased to exist in the same way it had for everyone else. You were eternal, untouchable by the passage of time. Your transformation began to transcend the very concept of time, rendering it obsolete. This collapse of time left the world in a state of disorientation and awe. People who had once feared the inevitable passage of time, the fading of youth, and the certainty of death, now witnessed a being who existed outside of it. You were timeless, and in your wake, all who looked upon you understood. Time was but a construct. For the mortal souls who had spent lifetimes struggling against the erosion of their own bodies, the sight of you was liberating. No longer would they succumb to the ravages of age, nor would they be bound by the ticking clock. You were the proof that true divinity is immune to the constraints of existence. The gods who once ruled over time now found themselves powerless in your presence, watching as you redefined it entirely. Time no longer marched toward an inevitable end. It flowed around you, bending, shifting, and echoing the eternal truth of your godhood. The eternal cycle of birth and death, growth and decay, was all contained within you. You were the Alpha and Omega, both the beginning and the end, and everything else, everything bound by time, was a mere reflection of your divine perfection. The heavens themselves seemed to tremble as the true scale of your power began to manifest. You were not simply a god, you were the source of all power. You rose beyond the boundaries of traditional divinity, surpassing gods who had reigned for millennia. No longer were you a part of any pantheon or mythology. You had become the central force of the cosmos itself. Every aspect of the universe seemed to bend around you. Stars collapsed and were reborn under your gaze. Galaxies twirled and spiraled in harmony with your essence. The primal forces of nature, gravity, light, dark, creation, and destruction flowed from you like a symphony. You had surpassed every cosmic entity that had ever existed. Your energy was now woven into the fabric of the very universe. This was not just a rise to power. This was the creation of a new cosmic order. The gods of old, who once sat in their lofty realms and ruled from their thrones, now found themselves irrelevant. You had created a new paradigm. The gods were now subordinates to the God of all. Your power had become the fundamental law of existence, eclipsing all that came before. Emotions ran wild across the earth, from joy to terror, as the people realized what had occurred. You were not just the divine ruler, you were the origin, the source, the core of all life and creation. Those who followed you felt connected to the very heartbeat of the universe itself, their spirits bound to yours. Those who resisted found themselves helpless, lost in the overwhelming tide of your divine energy. The universe no longer functioned as it had in the past. It was now a living reflection of your divinity. You had become the ultimate architect of reality, shaping it according to your will. All that was, all that is, and all that ever will be was now governed by your power, a power that was beyond anything the universe had ever known before. When your true form emerged from the cosmic shadows, the very earth trembled. The oceans swelled with energy. The mountains shook violently as though they were trying to free themselves from the grip of an ancient curse. The world had never seen such power, not in its darkest days, not in its brightest moments. You were the embodiment of all creation, and when you revealed yourself fully, the earth and sky could do nothing but bow. Cities fell into silence as people watched in awe, paralyzed by the magnitude of your presence. Nature itself seemed to respond to you. The wind whispered your name, the trees bent to greet you, and even the sun seemed to pause in reverence. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, the air thick with the vibrations of your divine frequency. The world had never been so alive and so afraid. As your God form took shape, it was as if the very fabric of existence had been redesigned. Your appearance was both terrifying and beautiful, a being that transcended any mortal or divine form. Those who gazed upon you saw not just the future, they saw the beginning of a new reality. The rules of physics, space, and time no longer mattered in the face of your full manifestation. Emotions surged through the hearts of all who saw you. Fear for those who didn't understand. Wonder for those who had waited for you. Love for those who saw you as the savior of the universe. But above all, there was a deep, collective reverence, for they knew that this was not merely a god they were seeing. This was the God One, the one who had always been meant to rule, and everything in the universe bent before you. The world, the cosmos, and even time itself now seemed to center around you. The true form of the Chosen One had emerged, and with it came the dawning of a new era, a new reign, and a new understanding of divinity. The earth was no longer just a planet, it was your kingdom, a reflection of your power, and all who inhabited it would witness the unfolding of a new cosmic order. The shift was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was a terrifying transformation, not because of its chaos, but because of its immensity. Divine power, once seen as orderly and balanced, had now spiraled into unpredictability. Your godhood was no longer just a force to be reckoned with. It was a force that broke the very laws that governed existence. For those who had once revered divine beings, this shift was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The gods they had known were beings of rules, of structure, of authority. But you were something beyond that. You were unpredictable, uncontainable, and unstoppable. The boundaries that defined godhood were no longer valid. You were chaos and order, creation and destruction, all rolled into one. The world trembled not from fear of your power, but from the sheer scale of what was happening. Cities watched as reality itself bent under your influence. The stars, once fixed and eternal, seemed to shift and change, like ripples on a pond that stretched to infinity. People realized they were witnessing the unraveling of the divine order, but it wasn't just terror. It was also an awakening. Those who had once relied on control, on structure, on the certainty of rules, found themselves in a state of rebirth. They began to understand that true divinity wasn't about being bound by rules. It was about being free, and you had shown them what freedom looked like. It was terrifying, but it was beautiful. And so the shift continued, a cosmic crescendo where divinity no longer obeyed the rules of the old world. Your power was uncontrollable, and in its terrifying unpredictability, it was both the end and the beginning. The age of gods who followed rules had passed. The era of the crazy god was here. The title was bestowed upon you not out of mockery, but out of recognition. To call you crazy was to acknowledge the insanity of divine perfection, where no logic could fit. And yet it was in this very chaos that the world found its ultimate truth. You were beyond understanding. Your powers surpassed all definitions. You were a being who defied every expectation and shone brighter than any star. The people accepted this title with mixed emotions. Some feared you. They couldn't understand a god who wasn't predictable. They could not fathom the scale of your being. Others worshipped you. They saw in you the ultimate freedom, the liberation from the restrictions that had bound them for centuries. But no one could deny that you were the one. The title of Crazy God had become a symbol of ultimate truth, a recognition of something far greater than they had ever dreamed of. And as your power continued to grow, those who had once questioned the divine began to kneel, not in fear, but in awe of the unstoppable force you had become. The world had no more questions. You were the God One, the one who had risen beyond all, and nothing could stop you. Nothing had ever been more clear. The world had witnessed your ascension, and in its wake, everything had changed. For so long, humanity had struggled to understand the nature of divinity, questioning, praying, and searching for answers in sacred texts, in ancient teachings, and in the very stars themselves. But now, all questions had been answered. The final realization had arrived, and it was clear. You are the God One, the ultimate, the eternal, the creator of all. At first, the people resisted. They couldn't fathom the enormity of your transformation. How could one being, one person, rise to become the embodiment of all that was divine? The weight of your power was incomprehensible, and many turned their gaze away, unable to bear the truth. But the truth, like the dawn breaking through the darkest night, could not be denied. It was inescapable. Across the world, from the tallest mountains to the deepest oceans, from the bustling cities to the quietest villages, people began to accept the inevitable. In every heart, a single thought began to form. You were the one they had all been waiting for. They didn't know it before, but they now realized that the entire universe had been waiting for you, waiting for your emergence to lead, to guide, and to rule with an unearthly wisdom. It wasn't just the humans who saw this shift. All beings, from the angels in the heavens to the creatures below, from the cosmic forces to the very atoms that made up the universe, recognized you. The world had trembled at your rise, but now it would find peace. You were the Alpha and the Omega, both the beginning and the end, the cause and the effect. The universe had been waiting for its true ruler, and now it had found you. Your true form, once unimaginable, was now an indelible part of existence. No longer could there be doubts, no longer could there be confusion. Every single belief system, every prophecy, every myth had led to this singular moment, the moment when you took your place as the God One. And in that place, there was no rival, no equal. You stood alone, all-powerful and eternal, the supreme force governing all of existence. The universe had changed, and with it, so had everything else. Time itself could no longer separate the past from the present, and the future was now yours to shape. You were not simply a god among many, you had become the god of everything. The reign of old, the divisions that had once separated gods and men, had crumbled beneath the weight of your divine transformation. And now a new era began, one that would be defined by your power, your wisdom, and your eternal reign. The final realization was clear for all to see. You are the God One. There would be no more searching, no more wondering. The world had found its ultimate answer, and nothing would ever be the same again. From the darkest corners of existence, the first light of your transformation broke through like a supernova, blinding, impossible to ignore. This was no ordinary awakening. It was the birth of a new cosmic order. The universe, vast and chaotic, suddenly seemed to pulse with your heartbeat. Galaxies realigned, stars flickered with new energy, and ancient celestial bodies bent to acknowledge your emergence. This dawn was both terrifying and magnificent, a clear signal that the old laws of reality were being rewritten. As you stepped into this new era, the cosmic balance that once ruled was disrupted. The gods who had maintained control for eons found their authority diminished. They sensed the shift, felt their powers wane, and understood that your arrival was not just another chapter, but a complete rewriting of the story. It was a moment of reckoning, not only for the gods, but for the very fabric of existence itself. Your presence awakened dormant energies hidden deep within the cosmos.